Hi, I'm Dr. Bruce Chalmer. Why should you get married? Nowadays, most of the traditional reasons to get married are no longer valid. How about sex? For the vast majority of Americans at least, there is no longer any social stigma attached to unmarried consenting adults having sex. The usual advice nowadays is to be sure you're sexually compatible with someone before you marry them. So you certainly don't need to get married just to have sex. What about having children? Well, having children outside of marriage is now close to the norm. In recent years, 40% of births in the United States were born to unmarried mothers. And among those births, an increasing percentage of them are born to couples who live together. So there are more and more people living together as couples, people who presumably could marry each other if they wanted to, who are having children without getting married. There's little social pressure to get married just because you're pregnant. The shotgun wedding is becoming a relic. Even the legal protections of marriage aren't all that difficult to replicate in other ways, at least for many purposes. Unmarried people can hold property and money in common, can adopt children together, can designate each other as healthcare proxies, and can name each other as beneficiaries. You might pay more in taxes as an unmarried couple, but there are some circumstances where you might actually pay more if you get married. Yes, there are some legal reasons why marriage is helpful, but that's not what you're wondering. Probably, if you're watching this video. No, if you're like a lot of the couples I've worked with, you're wondering why you should get married because your partner wants to and you don't. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you want to and your partner doesn't, and you haven't been able to come up with convincing enough arguments. So, why should you get married if you can live pretty much the same way without getting married? Spoiler alert. I made this video because I think marriage is important, vital even. But that doesn't mean I think it's for everyone at all times. So I'm going to start with a bunch of reasons why maybe you shouldn't get married. First, if you think marriage will somehow guarantee that your relationship will last, think again. The chance of an American marriage ending in divorce these days is actually not quite 50%, but it's in the 40s. In other words, it's not uncommon. And of course, marriage doesn't guarantee fidelity. Lots of married people cheat on their spouses. Not everyone does, but a lot do. So even though marriage represents a promise to each other to stay married and not cheat, it often doesn't turn out that way. And if you think that getting married will reduce conflict between you, you'll find out you're mistaken. The only argument that getting married reliably eliminates is the one about whether you should get married or not. And in exchange, getting married often intensifies the other conflicts you're already having because the stakes are higher. I've worked with many couples who get into a locked dance with each other. She wants to get married and is constantly fighting with her partner because he won't propose, and he won't propose because they're fighting so much. She thinks if they just get married, it would end the conflict. He thinks if she'd just not be so fixated on marriage, it would end the conflict. Usually it turns out they're both wrong. Whether they get married or not, they're still going to have to deal with conflict. And here are some other bad reasons to get married. Don't get married because it's the obvious next step in your relationship, or because it means you're really committing to each other, or because you don't feel like a complete person if you're not married. Marriage might be the obvious next step, but the obvious next step sometimes turns out to be a nasty stumble. Commitment to each other can be just as valid without marriage. Indeed, it better be, because marriage doesn't guarantee anything about how you'll feel about each other over the long haul. And if you think marriage will help you be a more complete person, you're in for a rude awakening. Once you encounter the reality that you actually have differences with your other half, maybe painful differences, you'll have to handle your anxiety on your own. Your partner can't save you from that, and your efforts to get each other to do so just spiral. If you can't get hold of yourself, don't get married. Even your love for each other, your sense of being a team, of having each other's back, of being willing to sacrifice for each other, of joy in each other's presence, of ecstatic connection, that kind of love isn't a good enough reason to get married. You can feel that way without marriage, and marriage doesn't guarantee that it lasts. Well, that's a pretty dismal view of marriage, isn't it? But as I said, I think marriage is very important, even vital. So, what should prompt you to get married? You should get married when you realize it's not about you. Let me repeat that. You should get married when you realize it's not about you. Marriage isn't about you, or about your partner, or even about the two of you as a couple. Marriage is a commitment to something outside of you, a deep acceptance of responsibility to do your part in the big picture. Of course, you don't have to be married to be a responsible person committed to doing your part in the big picture. Anyone, married or single, can do that and should. I act responsibly in any context when I recognize that everything isn't about me, when I'm willing to sacrifice and subordinate my own comfort or interest to the needs of the whole. What I'm saying is, the reason to get married is that you want to put your relationship in that same category. To get married is to commit your love and your life as a couple to a higher cause. It's not about how much you love each other and how happy your relationship makes you feel. It's not about you. It's bigger than that. Or, if it isn't, don't get married. Here's another way of saying it. Marriage isn't a contract. It's a covenant. Contracts are agreements about mutual benefit. Covenants are commitments incorporated into your sense of self and are about much more than mutual benefit. You enter into a covenant as an expression of your deepest values. In the case of marriage, those values involve relationships to family, community, and humanity in general that are, in large measure, not yours to define. When you get married, you're accepting that others, other people, other families and communities, even legal systems, have a role in defining and shaping your relationship. It's not about you. Marriage ceremonies in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions incorporate this idea explicitly by emphasizing that marriage forms a relationship sanctified by God. But you don't have to be religious in the traditional Western sense to understand this concept. When you get married, you're voluntarily accepting that something much bigger than you and your partner is involved. You're taking on a new identity in the world. This explains why access to marriage has been so important historically to people who have been denied it in the past, such as interfaith, interracial, or same-sex couples. Marriage represents something much bigger than simply celebrating a couple's love. It's not about them. It's about everyone. Many of the couples I've met who are struggling with whether to get married understand this intuitively, even if they might have difficulty articulating it. It's not just a piece of paper from the City Hall, to quote Joni Mitchell. If it were, they wouldn't be struggling about it. But I've also met many couples who are surprised by just how much marriage matters, sometimes not realizing it until they are already married, and sometimes they find out they had no idea what they're getting into. Marriage can be wonderfully reassuring and comforting in that it connects you to something greater. But, for the same reason, marriage intensifies the anxiety you feel when important differences emerge. So, don't get married unless you feel that both of you can handle it. But if you can, if you're up to the challenge and can see yourself and your love as part of an interwoven fabric much greater than yourselves, well, l'chaim. I'm Dr. Bruce Chalmer. If there's a topic you'd like me to address, drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you.